Well, thank you very much. And yes, I seem to remember now it's 40 years since I first came to Copenhagen, and the weather has actually improved. And it's some 25 years since I first went to Greenland as well. And in those days, it was a question of Greenland and the United States, and that's what I'm going to be talking on in one sense at least. The title I've been given is the 51st state, and goodness, there's a question mark after that, Greenland between Danish and American ambitions in the Arctic. So what we see when we look back is the more traditional view, if you like, of Greenland between. This is Greenland very much as the object. Greenland as the football between the two sides, between East and West, between North America and Europe. Whereas today, it's a little bit out of focus there, but what you see is Greenland much more as a subject. Greenland as a player in the game. Greenland as part of the Arctic Circle, if you like. So what I'm going to be talking about is something on the historical background of Greenland between Denmark and the United States, the current situation, then look at the security needs of Greenland and the options for providers for these security needs, and then summing up more or less by putting Greenland between the United States and Denmark. Okay, first looking back, just to say that when the option was there for the United States to take over Greenland in 1917 and later in the 1930s when Senator Lundin proposed to Congress to purchase Greenland, it wasn't taken up. But of course, as we know, the war intervened with 9th of April 1940, and the United States was called in, this time to fill that power vacuum in what they defined as a Monroe Doctrine area, also to keep control of the resources there, and later as a bridge to Europe. And that was put down in the 1941 Defense Agreement, then turned into the 1951 agreement in the context of NATO, but still also in the context of the United States and Europe. United States and Europe, that context changed throughout the 1950s, throughout the 1960s. Yes, in that agreement, there was the clauses there protecting the Greenlandic people, but when it came to building Thule, the hunters were moved. So we still had Greenland very much as an object between the two sides. We saw then, as I said, the change over time of the importance of Greenland strategically for the United States, but also we saw the introduction of what was later called the Greenland Card being used in a sense by Denmark in its NATO membership, in one way of getting perhaps a light membership of NATO at that time. And we also then saw that Greenland became very important with the upgrade of the early warning system. And at that stage, after 1979 Home Rule, at that stage, the Greenlandic politicians slowly but surely started to become involved. And what we see now is that the relationship between the Greenlandic political system and Denmark has been much more institutionalized on security and foreign affairs matters in the Kleist-Friis Committee. And the movement, which has already been mentioned by Pierre, the movement towards self-government started a decade ago. We saw also in the beginning of the 2000s the clash again over Thule, but this time definitely the Greenlandic elite were involved. The United States, what did they want? Missile defense. Denmark, what Denmark wanted was to stand shoulder to shoulder with the United States, but for Greenland, it was to get the Greenland Card into their own hands. And indeed, when that agreement was signed in 2004 by Colin Powell, going to Greenland, updating the 51 treaty, the other two treaties on economic, cultural cooperation, and environmental cooperation. We see the different descriptions there of these agreements. And we see that Powell diplomatically mentions cooperation between the United States and Greenland. What happened to Denmark there, eh? Well, Foreign Minister of Denmark, Stig Muller, brings it back in. So a very special day in Danish Greenland, mention them, United States relationship. What do we see from Josef Motzfeldt, from the Greenlandic side? Well, there it's a matter of Greenlandic politics. It's a matter of going towards increased foreign policy independence. So now Greenland has become very much of the subject in these issues, no longer the football just to be kicked around. And so what we see with the move towards self-government this year, a very important year for Greenland in these matters, and the new government, which has been mentioned, the emphasis here on in the government's program on an international presence, the Arctic, of course, mentioned, highlighted in that program, and the question put forward by Prime Minister Kleist about further discussions about the 2004 agreement. So no longer is Greenland the football, but to mix the metaphors, Greenland has the Greenland card much more in its hand. Whether this is going to be worth as much with the present administration, which is a bit cool on missile defense compared with the Bush administration, is another matter. But then let's look at the future security needs of Greenland. As we've mentioned, as has been seen before in other presentations, it is really a question now not only of control of territory, which the Admiral has talked about, but also securing the economic zone, the exclusive economic zone, EEZ there. But also, as Piers mentioned, economic security is going to be vital for such a country as Greenland. And we, of course, have to add to that the environmental security for what that means for the Greenlanders. And again, looking at what has been said by the Greenlandic elite, the whole question of culture comes in here, the cultural integrity of their country. How might this be secured? Well, okay, traditional ways through armed force. Yeah, but that's somewhat limited, as has been mentioned, of course, also costly. Alliance. You can join as an independent state or indeed as part of a Danish realm. You're already part of an alliance called NATO. Or you can rest on the hegemon, on the United States, the protector there. But then, as well as the bits being protected, you have to pay a price. So what is lost there? Is it culture? Is that where you pay the price? Of course, through diplomacy and international law, which again have been mentioned, international organizations. But in order to do that, don't you need the resources to participate? And Pierre has mentioned that, I think, very strikingly about what is needed in order to be active there. Of course, there is another option, which is, if you like, the Albanian option or the North Korean option, which is isolation. But even given the position of Greenland, that is going to be extremely difficult.